Hi, my name is Joachim Kavalakatt, and today I'll be presenting my senior honors project on the impact of growth mindset intervention in Cal State Fullerton students. So my journey with my senior honors project begins in my freshman and sophomore years. So at this point, I was taking a lot of introductory STEM courses, courses like general chemistry, biology, physics, and I noticed a lot of similarities between students and how they addressed, difficulties and inherent complexity when it comes to taking these types of courses for the first time. So I noticed a lot of students, say statements like, "Oh, I guess I'm not really a science person. And I guess I really don't have the brain for math, or I'm not wired for physics or calculus." And that got me thinking about how these students sort of perceive themselves in terms of learning these difficult first time subjects and how that would actually impact their success when it comes to, completing the course, when it comes to graduating, when it comes to going through with a STEM major. So that gives me the opportunity to present the area of growth mindset research and what actually a growth mindset is. So the researcher that coined the term growth mindset, her name was Carol Dweck. And in the late 1980s, she did a lot of pioneering experiments that sort of elucidated what a growth mindset was. So she took 10-year-old students in the classroom setting, and in an early experiment, she gave them a bunch of complex problems and tasks. And these were problems that, would make any 10-year-old pretty, scratch his head and really try to sort of tackle the difficulty of that. And in another early experiment, she gave the question to a bunch of 10-year-old students as well, asking them, when do you feel smart in school? And the purpose of this question was to ask, when do these students, in what context do they sort of increase their self-esteem when it comes to learning? And what Carol Dweck realized was that there were two groups that sort of formed out of this experiment. There was one group that, of students that were devastated by failure. They were very averse to risk, and they didn't want to struggle. They didn't like to struggle with their work. They were really averse to failing, and they didn't enjoy that experience. And when asked, when do you feel smart in school? These students only felt smart when, their work was without any errors, when they sort of breezed through their homework without any effort or struggle. And another group of students actually loved the challenge. They enjoyed the complexity of, getting their brains to work and sort of struggle through that hard problem or hard task. And they felt the smartest when they sort of, sat down, tackled a problem, really grappled with it, and actually got through the problem. And that's what gave them sort of, that feeling of self-esteem. So Carol Dweck basically gave these two different mindsets, two different theories. So she called this group that, that did not enjoy that complexity, she gave it the entity theory. And this is the belief that when it comes to learning, your qualities and traits are fixed and sort of set in stone. And students that, had this entity theory mindset, they attributed their performance in the class, their performance when it comes to these complex problems and tasks, as the most important goal. They wanted, to sort of make the grade as opposed to learn the concept. Whereas students with the incremental theory, that is the theory that, when it comes to learning, it's your qualities and traits that are malleable, that can change and evolve over time. Students with this theory, they attributed learning and mastery as the most important goal, to actually conquer a concept and really know that you know this concept fully, as opposed to, getting a good grade on a test or making top ranks. So after these two theories have come out, it's been about 30 years, and these experiments have been the pioneering experiments of growth mindset research. Today, we refer to the entity theory as a fixed mindset and the incremental theory as a growth mindset. Once again, the entity theory, the belief that, your qualities and traits are fixed when it comes to learning, that would be a very fixed mindset. And the incremental theory, the belief that, when it comes to learning, your qualities and traits are malleable, that is referred to as a growth mindset. So as you can see here are some common assumptions and sort of blanket statements when it comes to growth and fixed mindsets. A person with a growth mindset can really persevere and challenge themselves through struggle. And they see struggle as an opportunity to learn and, go towards mastery. Whereas a fixed mindset views struggle as sort of like a limiting factor and a indication that they are not, talented or able at a certain concept or at a certain task. So when it comes to the methods and design of the study, we looked at a CNSM 101 class called Thinking Like Einstein. And it was taken by first-year freshman students who were pursuing either, STEM majors such as science, bio, mathematics, any of the majors within STEM. And there were interventions that we had held from week 1 and week 3. These interventions consisted of personal anecdotes, resources, online topics, TED Talks, as well as group sessions in order to basically administer growth mindset content. And these were followed by a mixed method study design that was used to collect both, quantitative and qualitative data using surveys. And with these surveys, we measured a student's affinity towards a fixed mindset as well as a student's affinity towards a growth mindset. And how are we measuring these scores? Well, we use something called a Dweck mindset instrument. And basically what this is it's a set of questions basically from Carol Dweck. And she basically has made this instrument to assess how fixed or how growth a student can be based on their answers to survey responses and a set of questions. So she uses a Likert scale, and students sort of rank their options to strongly disagree or strongly agree. And there's sort of like a spectrum that students can choose from. And we use Qualtrics to collect survey data in week 1, week 3, and week 13, as indicated before. And as you can see, the key thing to note here is that when it comes to measuring these scores, the lower the score, the more indicative of a stronger mindset. So someone with a low growth mindset score, such as if a student had a growth mindset score of 1, that means that they have a very strong growth mindset. Whereas if a student scored a 6, they would have a very low, weak growth mindset. So the research questions we wanted to ask was, how do students' mindsets change after participating in these mindset interventions? And the second research question was, is there any difference of the impact of these interventions based on sex? So how do these sort of growth mindset changes that come about from intervention differ based on sex? So let's first look at the first research question. So generally, when it comes to our growth mindset scores, we see a increasing growth mindset trend. So as you can see from week 1 to week 13, our median growth scores, they sort of decrease. So once again, as our scores decrease, that means that a lower score is paired with a higher growth mindset, as indicated by our DMI instrument. So we basically see that as we go from week 1 to week 13 in our intervention, students are scoring lower and lower on our mindset scores, which means that they have a higher and higher growth mindset. So we see the same sort of thing when it comes to our fixed score patterns. As we go from week 1 to week 13, students are increasing in their fixed scores, meaning they're getting less and less fixed. As you can see for the fixed mindset scores, a very low score means that you are more fixed. So as students go from a higher score to even higher scores, we see that they're getting even less and less fixed and actually possess a less and less strong of a fixed mindset. So just to see what's happening in real time, when we go from week 1 to week 3, we see that 59% of our students are actually increasing in their growth mindset, as indicated by more growth. We see that 24% of our students are actually decreasing in our growth mindset, and about 17% are not really changing in their growth mindset. But statistically, we see that a majority of the students are significantly increasing in their growth mindset from week 1 to week 3. The same can be said about week 1 to week 3 in our fixed scores. We see that a majority of the students, 62%, are actually decreasing in their fixed mindset. Only about 20% and another about close 18% are not really doing that. About 20% are becoming more fixed, and about the same are not really changing. But this goes to stand in total, a majority of the students are becoming less fixed. When we look at the intervention as a whole, from week 1, which is the start of the intervention, to week 13, which is close to the end, we see the same sort of general trend. About half the students are becoming less fixed, and the remaining aren't really changing or actually becoming more fixed. But majority of the students, over half, are becoming decreased in their fixed mindset. So when we were looking at growth scores, although this is just shy of becoming significant, we see this sort of similar trend in that at least about half of the students from week 1 to week 13 are actually, becoming more growth. So when it comes to our second research question, we want to find out about any differences between males and females when it comes to the impact of intervention. And we see that when it comes to that, by the end of week 13, females actually had a higher growth score on average. So what does this mean? We've known that if we actually have a higher growth score, that means you have less of the growth mindset. So a higher score means you have a lower growth mindset or a lower fixed mindset. So this means that basically by the end of week 13, females had a lower growth mindset and male students had a significantly higher level of growth mindset. So this goes to show one differential impact of the intervention based on sex. And what's important to note is that there's no difference between male and female students in fixed scores by the end of week 13. So by the end, male and female students aren't necessarily different on their fixed mindset scores, but they are ending off on different growth mindset scores. So male and female students aren't really different in terms of getting fixed, but they are different in terms of getting a higher growth mindset. So now that we've quantified how much our students are changing when it comes to increasing their growth mindsets and decreasing their fixed mindsets, how does that look like? How does that qualitatively look like? And when we look at our results, let's look at this question that we see in week 1 and week 3. After participating in growth mindset workshops, how has your attitude and perception towards failure and challenges changed? So a lot of students actually now sort of indicate that their outlook on failure is now as an opportunity, sort of like an opportunity to grow and to learn to, change your outlook and to change how you view struggle and how you view failure. So now students are viewing failure as an opportunity to grow instead of something that's indicative of just your talent as a whole. So in another question, we see that a lot of students are asked what are some of the strengths that they found in these 2 workshops. And a lot of students engaged with how they found learning to be this sort of muscle that they can flex and sort of grow over time, that their act of learning is something that's not set in stone, but something that's sort of that can evolve and sort of grow with time as long as they put in, practice and effort. So in another qualitative impact, we see for these questions that sort of indicate statements that students either can disagree or agree with. These statements basically look at, hey, is growth mindset valuable? Hey, can students believe that they can learn challenging topics with effort and determination and persistence? And if students have any differential, views when it comes to encountering challenging situations. And in all 3 of these statements, we see by the end of week 3, which is when these questions were asked, majority of students strongly agreed with these statements. And that's one of the differential qualitative impacts we see when it comes to this intervention. So one of the biggest implications from our data is that it really does show that when it comes to these STEM specific courses and STEM disciplines, there's a clear benefit of administering growth mindset interventions. Specifically, we can show that between week 1 and 3, there's a clear significant impact in increasing growth mindsets and decreasing fixed mindsets. And between weeks 1 to 13, there's a clear significant impact in decreasing fixed mindsets. And this does provide support for our first 2 research questions. And with regards to the second research questions, we would need a larger sample size and more data to actually further investigate and clarify differences based on sex. So for future work and implications, we see that we would want to sort of increase the frequency of our interventions as well as implement our interventions in different classes to see how, in different areas of STEM, how interventions can be useful. We also would like to investigate differences in underrepresented minority groups and to see how this would also correlate with sex, with all these other different characteristics as well. I would like to acknowledge my mentor, Dr. Julia Chan, as well as the Chan Lab Research Group for giving me a lot of needed guidance on this and a lot of help. They were sort of like the guiding light for all of the practices and analyses that we used, and they were especially helpful. And what I want to end off with is sort of this image of a child falling off a bike. So as instructors, as students, as classmates, as peers, we all have the power to change our own mindsets as well as the mindsets of others. And when we see a child falling off a bike, as a parent, as a friend, we don't tell the child, hey, I guess you don't have, I guess you're not a bike person, or I guess you just don't have the wiring to ride a bike. We don't say that. We say, hey, dust yourself off, pick up the bike again and practice. Anyone can ride a bike if they practice well enough and they just repeat it. And if we only apply this attitude towards STEM courses, this can be the difference between a student dropping at the first encounter of difficulty versus graduating STEM and really going on to pursue future career plans in STEM. So what I want to end off with is if we can adopt this mindset into our college campuses, we can make it okay to struggle, make it okay to fail, and use that as sort of like the avenue for students to really embrace difficulty. We can really have a transformation within our public education system. Thank you.